Welcome to Bedtime Classics. Let the world around you grow quiet. Tonight's story is Ashputtel, Cinderella, a fairy tale by the brothers Grimm. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and drift gently into sleep. The wife of a rich man fell sick, and when she felt that her end drew nigh, she called her only daughter to her bedside and said, "Always be a good girl, and I will look down from heaven and watch over you." Soon afterwards, she shut her eyes and died, and was buried in the garden. And the little girl went every day to her grave and wept, and was always good and kind to all about her. And the snow fell and spread a beautiful white covering over the grave. But by the time the spring came, and the sun had melted it away again, her father had married another wife. This new wife had 2 daughters of her own that she brought home with her. They were fair in face but foul at heart, and it was now a sorry time for the poor little girl. "What does the good-for-nothing want in the parlour?" said they. "They who would eat bread should first earn it. Away with the kitchen maid." Then they took away her fine clothes and gave her an old grey frock to put on, and laughed at her and turned her into the kitchen. There she was forced to do hard work, to rise early before daylight, to bring the water to make the fire, to cook and to wash. Besides that, the sisters plagued her in all sorts of ways and laughed at her. In the evening when she was tired, she had no bed to lie down on, but was made to lie by the hearth among the ashes. And as this, of course, made her always dusty and dirty, they called her Ashputtel. It happened once that the father was going to the fair and asked his wife's daughters what he should bring them. "Fine clothes," said the first. "Pearls and diamonds," cried the second. "Now, child," said he to his own daughter, "what will you have?" "The first twig, dear father, that brushes against your hat when you turn your face to come homewards," said she. Then he bought for the first 2 the fine clothes and pearls and diamonds they had asked for. And on his way home, as he rode through a green copse, a hazel twig brushed against him and almost pushed off his hat. So he broke it off and brought it away, and when he got home he gave it to his daughter. Then she took it and went to her mother's grave and planted it there, and cried so much that it was watered with her tears, and there it grew and became a fine tree. 3 times every day she went to it and cried, and soon a little bird came and built its nest upon the tree, and talked with her, and watched over her, and brought her whatever she wished for. Now it happened that the king of that land held a feast, which was to last 3 days, and out of those who came to it, his son was to choose a bride for himself. Ashputtel's 2 sisters were asked to come, so they called her up and said, "Now, comb our hair, brush our shoes, and tie our sashes for us, for we are going to dance at the king's feast." Then she did as she was told, but when all was done she could not help crying, for she thought to herself she should so have liked to have gone with them to the ball. And at last she begged her mother very hard to let her go. "You, Ashputtel," said she, "you who have nothing to wear, no clothes at all, and who cannot even dance, you want to go to the ball." And when she kept on begging, she said at last, to get rid of her, "I will throw this dishful of peas into the ash heap, and if in 2 hours' time you have picked them all out, you shall go to the feast too." Then she threw the peas down among the ashes, but the little maiden ran out at the back door into the garden and cried out, "Hither, hither, through the sky, turtle doves and linnets, fly. Blackbird, thrush, and chaffinch gay. Hither, hither, haste away. One and all come help me quick. Haste ye, pick, pick, pick. Then first came 2 white doves, flying in at the kitchen window. Next came 2 turtle doves, and after them came all the little birds under heaven, chirping and fluttering in, and they flew down into the ashes. And the little doves stooped their heads down and set to work, pick, 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 and then the others began to pick, 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 and among them all they soon picked out all the good grain and put it into a dish, but left the ashes. Long before the end of the hour, the work was quite done, and all flew out again at the windows. Then Ashputtel brought the dish to her mother, overjoyed at the thought that now she should go to the ball. But the mother said, "No, no, you slut, you have no clothes and cannot dance, you shall not go." And when Ashputtel begged very hard to go, she said, "If you can, in 1 hour's time, pick 2 of those dishes of peas out of the ashes, you shall go too." And thus she thought she should at least get rid of her. So she shook 2 dishes of peas into the ashes. But the little maiden went out into the garden at the back of the house and cried out as before. "Hither, hither through the sky, turtle doves and linnets fly, blackbird, thrush and chaffinch gay. Hither, hither, haste away. One and all come help me quick. Haste ye, pick, pick, pick." Then first came 2 white doves in at the kitchen window. Next came 2 turtle doves, and after them came all the little birds under heaven, chirping and hopping about, and they flew down into the ashes, and the little doves put their heads down and set to work, pick, pick, pick. And then the others began pick, 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 and they put all the good grain into the dishes and left all the ashes. Before half an hour's time, all was done, and out they flew again. And then Ashputtel took the dishes to her mother, rejoicing to think that she should now go to the ball. But her mother said, "It is all of no use. You cannot go, you have no clothes, and cannot dance, and you would only put us to shame." And off she went with her 2 daughters to the ball. Now, when all were gone, and nobody left at home, Ashputtel went sorrowfully and sat down under the hazel tree and cried out, "Shake, shake, hazel tree, gold and silver over me!" Then her friend the bird flew out of the tree and brought a gold and silver dress for her, and slippers of spangled silk, and she put them on, and followed her sisters to the feast. But they did not know her, and thought it must be some strange princess. She looked so fine and beautiful in her rich clothes. And they never once thought of Ashputtel, taking it for granted that she was safe at home in the dirt. The king's son soon came up to her and took her by the hand and danced with her, and no one else, and he never left her hand. But when anyone else came to ask her to dance, he said, "This lady is dancing with me." Thus they danced till a late hour of the night, and then she wanted to go home, and the king's son said, "I shall go and take care of you to your home," for he wanted to see where the beautiful maiden lived. But she slipped away from him, unawares, and ran off towards home. And as the prince followed her, she jumped up into the pigeon house and shut the door. Then he waited till her father came home, and told him that the unknown maiden, who had been at the feast, had hid herself in the pigeon house. But when they had broken open the door, they found no one within, and as they came back into the house, Ashputtel was lying, as she always did, in her dirty frock by the ashes, and her dim little lamp was burning in the chimney. For she had run as quickly as she could through the pigeon house and on to the hazel tree, and had there taken off her beautiful clothes and put them beneath the tree that the bird might carry them away, and had lain down again amid the ashes in her little grey frock. The next day, when the feast was again held, and her father, mother and sisters were gone, Ashputtel went to the hazel tree and said, "Shake, shake, hazel tree, gold and silver over me." And the bird came and brought a still finer dress than the one she had worn the day before. And when she came in it to the ball, everyone wondered at her beauty. But the king's son, who was waiting for her, took her by the hand and danced with her. And when anyone asked her to dance, he said as before, "This lady is dancing with me." When night came, she wanted to go home, and the king's son followed her as before, that he might see into what house she went. But she sprang away from him all at once into the garden behind her father's house. In this garden stood a fine large pear tree full of ripe fruit, and Ashputtel, not knowing where to hide herself, jumped up into it without being seen. Then the king's son lost sight of her and could not find out where she was gone, but waited till her father came home and said to him, "The unknown lady who danced with me has slipped away, and I think she must have sprung into the pear tree." The father thought to himself, "Can it be Ashputtel?" So he had an axe brought, and they cut down the tree but found no one upon it. And when they came back into the kitchen, there lay Ashputtel among the ashes, for she had slipped down on the other side of the tree and carried her beautiful clothes back to the bird at the hazel tree, and then put on her little grey frock. The third day, when her father and mother and sisters were gone, she went again into the garden and said, "Shake, shake, hazel tree, gold and silver over me." Then her kind friend the bird brought a dress still finer than the former one, and slippers which were all of gold, so that when she came to the feast, no one knew what to say for wonder at her beauty. And the king's son danced with nobody but her. And when anyone else asked her to dance, he said, "This lady is my partner, sir." When night came, she wanted to go home, and the king's son would go with her, and said to himself, "I will not lose her this time." But, however, she again slipped away from him, though in such a hurry that she dropped her left golden slipper upon the stairs. The prince took the shoe and went the next day to the king his father and said, "I will take for my wife the lady that this golden slipper fits." Then both the sisters were overjoyed to hear it, for they had beautiful feet and had no doubt that they could wear the golden slipper. The eldest went first into the room where the slipper was and wanted to try it on, and the mother stood by. But her great toe could not go into it, and the shoe was altogether much too small for her. Then the mother gave her a knife and said, "Never mind, cut it off. When you are queen, you will not care about toes. You will not want to walk." So the silly girl cut off her great toe, and thus squeezed on the shoe and went to the king's son. Then he took her for his bride and set her beside him on his horse and rode away with her homewards. But on their way home they had to pass by the hazel tree that Ashputtel had planted, and on the branch sat a little dove singing, "Back again, back again, look to the shoe. The shoe is too small and not made for you. Prince, prince, look again for thy bride, for she's not the true one that sits by thy side." Then the prince got down and looked at her foot, and he saw by the blood that streamed from it what a trick she had played him. So he turned his horse round and brought the false bride back to her home and said, "This is not the right bride. Let the other sister try and put on the slipper." Then she went into the room and got her foot into the shoe, all but the heel, which was too large. But her mother squeezed it in, till the blood came and took her to the king's son. And he set her as his bride by his side on his horse and rode away with her. But when they came to the hazel tree, the little dove sat there still and sang, "Back again, back again, look to the shoe. The shoe is too small and not made for you. Prince, prince, look again for thy bride, for she's not the true one that sits by thy side." Then he looked down and saw that the blood streamed so much from the shoe that her white stockings were quite red. So he turned his horse and brought her also back again. "This is not the true bride," said he to the father. "Have you no other daughters?" "No," said he. "There is only a little dirty Ashputtel here, the child of my first wife. I am sure she cannot be the bride." The prince told him to send her, but the mother said, "No, no, she is much too dirty. She will not dare to show herself." However, the prince would have her come, and she first washed her face and hands, and then went in and curtsied to him, and he reached her the golden slipper. Then she took her clumsy shoe off her left foot and put on the golden slipper, and it fitted her as if it had been made for her. And when he drew near and looked at her face, he knew her and said, "This is the right bride." But the mother and both the sisters were frightened and turned pale with anger as he took Ashputtel on his horse and rode away with her. And when they came to the hazel tree, the white dove sang, "Home, home, look at the shoe, princess. The shoe was made for you. Prince, prince, take home thy bride, for she is the true one that sits by thy side." And when the dove had done its song, it came flying and perched upon her right shoulder, and so went home with her. That was Ashputtel, Cinderella. Sweet dreams. Welcome to Bedtime Classics. Let the world around you grow quiet. Tonight's story is Snowdrop, Snow White, a fairy tale by the brothers Grimm. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and drift gently into sleep. It was the middle of winter, when the broad flakes of snow were falling around, that the queen of a country many thousand miles off sat working at her window. The frame of the window was made of fine black ebony, and as she sat looking out upon the snow, she pricked her finger and 3 drops of blood fell upon it. Then she gazed thoughtfully upon the red drops that sprinkled the white snow, and said, "Would that my little daughter may be as white as that snow, as red as that blood, and as black as this ebony window frame." And so the little girl really did grow up. Her skin was as white as snow, her cheeks as rosy as the blood, and her hair as black as ebony, and she was called Snowdrop. But this queen died, and the king soon married another wife, who became queen and was very beautiful, but so vain that she could not bear to think that anyone could be handsomer than she was. She had a fairy looking-glass, to which she used to go, and then she would gaze upon herself in it and say, "Tell me, glass, tell me true. Of all the ladies in the land, who is fairest? Tell me who." And the glass had always answered, "Thou, queen, art the fairest in all the land." But Snowdrop grew more and more beautiful, and when she was 7 years old, she was as bright as the day and fairer than the queen herself. Then the glass one day answered the queen when she went to look in it as usual. "Thou, queen, art fair and beauteous to see, but Snowdrop is lovelier far than thee." When she heard this, she turned pale with rage and envy, and called to one of her servants and said, "Take Snowdrop away into the wide wood, that I may never see her any more." Then the servant led her away, but his heart melted when Snowdrop begged him to spare her life, and he said, "I will not hurt you, thou pretty child." So he left her by herself, and though he thought it most likely that the wild beasts would tear her in pieces, he felt as if a great weight were taken off his heart when he had made up his mind not to kill her, but to leave her to her fate, with the chance of someone finding and saving her. Then poor Snowdrop wandered along through the wood in great fear, and the wild beasts roared about her, but none did her any harm. In the evening she came to a cottage among the hills and went in to rest, for her little feet would carry her no further. Everything was spruce and neat in the cottage. On the table was spread a white cloth, and there were 7 little plates, 7 little loaves, and 7 little glasses with wine in them, and 7 knives and forks laid in order, and by the wall stood 7 little beds. As she was very hungry, she picked a little piece of each loaf and drank a very little wine out of each glass, and after that she thought she would lie down and rest. So she tried all the little beds, but one was too long and another was too short, till at last the 7th suited her, and there she laid herself down and went to sleep. By and by in came the masters of the cottage. Now they were 7 little dwarfs that lived among the mountains and dug and searched for gold. They lighted up their 7 lamps and saw at once that all was not right. The first said, "Who has been sitting on my stool?" The second, "Who has been eating off my plate?" The third, "Who has been picking my bread?" The fourth, "Who has been meddling with my spoon?" The fifth, "Who has been handling my fork?" The sixth, "Who has been cutting with my knife?" The seventh, "Who has been drinking my wine?" Then the first looked round and said, "Who has been lying on my bed?" And the rest came running to him, and everyone cried out that somebody had been upon his bed. But the 7th saw Snowdrop, and called all his brethren to come and see her. And they cried out with wonder and astonishment, and brought their lamps to look at her, and said, "Good heavens, what a lovely child she is!" And they were very glad to see her, and took care not to wake her. And the 7th dwarf slept an hour with each of the other dwarfs in turn, till the night was gone. In the morning, Snowdrop told them all her story, and they pitied her, and said if she would keep all things in order, and cook and wash and knit and spin for them, she might stay where she was, and they would take good care of her. Then they went out all day long to their work, seeking for gold and silver in the mountains, but Snowdrop was left at home, and they warned her and said, "The Queen will soon find out where you are, so take care and let no one in." But the Queen, now that she thought Snowdrop was dead, believed that she must be the handsomest lady in the land, and she went to her glass and said, "Tell me, glass, tell me true, of all the ladies in the land, who is fairest, tell me who." And the glass answered, "Thou, Queen, art the fairest in all this land, but over the hills in the greenwood shade, where the 7 dwarfs their dwelling have made, their Snowdrop is hiding her head, and she is lovelier far, O Queen, than thee." Then the Queen was very much frightened, for she knew that the glass always spoke the truth, and was sure that the servant had betrayed her. And she could not bear to think that anyone lived who was more beautiful than she was. So she dressed herself up as an old peddler, and went her way over the hills to the place where the dwarfs dwelt. Then she knocked at the door and cried, "Fine wares to sell." Snowdrop looked out at the window and said, "Good day, good woman. What have you to sell?" "Good wares, fine wares," said she, "laces and bobbins of all colours." "I will let the old lady in. She seems to be a very good sort of body," thought Snowdrop, as she ran down and unbolted the door. "Bless me," said the old woman, "how badly your stays are laced. Let me lace them up with one of my nice new laces." Snowdrop did not dream of any mischief, so she stood before the old woman, but she set to work so nimbly and pulled the lace so tight that Snowdrop's breath was stopped, and she fell down as if she were dead. "There's an end to all thy beauty," said the spiteful queen, and went away home. In the evening the 7 dwarfs came home, and I need not say how grieved they were to see their faithful Snowdrop stretched out upon the ground as if she was quite dead. However, they lifted her up, and when they found what ailed her, they cut the lace, and in a little time she began to breathe and very soon came to life again. Then they said, "The old woman was the queen herself. Take care another time and let no one in when we are away." When the queen got home, she went straight to her glass and spoke to it as before, but to her great grief it still said, "Thou, queen, art the fairest in all this land, but over the hills, in the greenwood shade, where the 7 dwarfs their dwelling have made, there Snowdrop is hiding her head, and she is lovelier far, O queen, than thee." Then the blood ran cold in her heart with spite and malice to see that Snowdrop still lived, and she dressed herself up again, but in quite another dress from the one she wore before, and took with her a poisoned comb. When she reached the dwarf's cottage, she knocked at the door and cried, "Fine wares to sell." But Snowdrop said, "I dare not let anyone in." Then the queen said, "Only look at my beautiful combs," and gave her the poisoned one. And it looked so pretty that she took it up and put it into her hair to try it. But the moment it touched her head, the poison was so powerful that she fell down senseless. "There you may lie," said the queen, and went her way. But by good luck, the dwarfs came in very early that evening, and when they saw Snowdrop lying on the ground, they thought what had happened, and soon found the poisoned comb. And when they took it away, she got well, and told them all that had passed, and they warned her once more not to open the door to anyone. Meantime, the queen went home to her glass, and shook with rage when she read the very same answer as before. And she said, "Snowdrop shall die, if it cost me my life." So she went by herself into her chamber, and got ready a poisoned apple. The outside looked very rosy and tempting, but whoever tasted it was sure to die. Then she dressed herself up as a peasant's wife, and travelled over the hills to the dwarf's cottage, and knocked at the door. But Snowdrop put her head out of the window and said, "I dare not let anyone in, for the dwarfs have told me not." "Do as you please," said the old woman, "but at any rate take this pretty apple, I will give it you." "No," said Snowdrop, "I dare not take it." "You silly girl," answered the other, "what are you afraid of? Do you think it is poisoned? Come, do you eat one part, and I will eat the other." Now the apple was so made up that one side was good, though the other side was poisoned. Then Snowdrop was much tempted to taste, for the apple looked so very nice, and when she saw the old woman eat, she could wait no longer. But she had scarcely put the piece into her mouth when she fell down dead upon the ground. "This time nothing will save thee," said the queen, and she went home to her glass. and at last it said, "Thou, Queen, art the fairest of all the fair." And then her wicked heart was glad, and as happy as such a heart could be. When evening came and the dwarfs had gone home, they found Snowdrop lying on the ground. No breath came from her lips, and they were afraid that she was quite dead. They lifted her up and combed her hair and washed her face with wine and water, but all was in vain, for the little girl seemed quite dead. So they laid her down upon a bier, and all 7 watched and bewailed her 3 whole days. And then they thought they would bury her. But her cheeks were still rosy, and her face looked just as it did while she was alive. So they said, "We will never bury her in the cold ground." And they made a coffin of glass so that they might still look at her, and wrote upon it in golden letters what her name was, and that she was a king's daughter. And the coffin was set among the hills, and one of the dwarfs always sat by it and watched. And the birds of the air came too, and bemoaned Snowdrop, and first of all came an owl, and then a raven, and at last a dove, and sat by her side. And thus Snowdrop lay for a long, long time, and still only looked as though she was asleep, for she was even now as white as snow, and as red as blood, and as black as ebony. At last a prince came and called at the dwarf's house, and he saw Snowdrop, and read what was written in golden letters. Then he offered the dwarfs money, and prayed and besought them to let him take her away. But they said, "We will not part with her for all the gold in the world." At last, however, they had pity on him, and gave him the coffin. But the moment he lifted it up to carry it home with him, the piece of apple fell from between her lips, and Snowdrop awoke and said, "Where am I?" And the prince said, "Thou art quite safe with me." Then he told her all that had happened, and said, "I love you far better than all the world, so come with me to my father's palace, and you shall be my wife." And Snowdrop consented, and went home with the prince, and everything was got ready with great pomp and splendour for their wedding. To the feast was asked, among the rest, Snowdrop's old enemy, the Queen. And as she was dressing herself in fine, rich clothes, she looked in the glass and said, "Tell me, glass, tell me true, of all the ladies in the land, who is fairest, tell me who?" And the glass answered, "Thou, lady, art loveliest here, I ween, but lovelier far is the new-made queen." When she heard this, she started with rage, but her envy and curiosity was so great that she could not help setting out to see the bride. And when she got there and saw that it was no other than Snowdrop, who, as she thought, had been dead a long while, she choked with rage and fell down and died. But Snowdrop and the prince lived and reigned happily over that land many, many years. And sometimes they went up into the mountains and paid a visit to the little dwarfs, who had been so kind to Snowdrop in her time of need. That was Snowdrop, Snow White, Sweet Dreams. Welcome to Bedtime Classics. Let the world around you grow quiet. Tonight's story is The Queen Bee, a fairy tale by the brothers Grimm. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and drift gently into sleep. 2 kings' sons once upon a time went into the world to seek their fortunes, but they soon fell into a wasteful, foolish way of living, so that they could not return home again. Then their brother, who was a little insignificant dwarf, went out to seek for his brothers. But when he had found them, they only laughed at him, to think that he, who was so young and simple, should try to travel through the world, when they, who were so much wiser, had been unable to get on. However, they all set out on their journey together, and came at last to an ant-hill. The two elder brothers would have pulled it down, in order to see how the poor ants in their fright would run about and carry off their eggs. But the little dwarf said, "Let the poor things enjoy themselves. I will not suffer you to trouble them." So on they went, and came to a lake where many, many ducks were swimming about. The two brothers wanted to catch two and roast them. But the dwarf said, "Let the poor things enjoy themselves. You shall not kill them." Next they came to a bee's nest in a hollow tree, and there was so much honey that it ran down the trunk, and the two brothers wanted to light a fire under the tree and kill the bees, so as to get their honey. But the dwarf held them back and said, "Let the pretty insects enjoy themselves. I cannot let you burn them." At length, the three brothers came to a castle, and as they passed by the stables, they saw fine horses standing there, but all were of marble, and no man was to be seen. Then they went through all the rooms till they came to a door on which were 3 locks, but in the middle of the door was a wicket, so that they could look into the next room. There they saw a little grey old man sitting at a table, and they called to him once or twice, but he did not hear. However, they called a 3rd time, and then he rose and came out to them. He said nothing, but took hold of them and led them to a beautiful table covered with all sorts of good things. And when they had eaten and drunk, he showed each of them to a bedchamber. The next morning he came to the eldest and took him to a marble table where there were 3 tablets containing an account of the means by which the castle might be disenchanted. The first tablet said, "In the wood, under the moss, lie the 1,000 pearls belonging to the king's daughter. They must all be found, and if one be missing by set of sun, he who seeks them will be turned into marble." The eldest brother set out and sought for the pearls the whole day. But the evening came, and he had not found the first 100, so he was turned into stone as the tablet had foretold. The next day the second brother undertook the task, but he succeeded no better than the first, for he could only find the second 100 of the pearls, and therefore he too was turned into stone. At last came the little dwarf's turn, and he looked in the moss, but it was so hard to find the pearls, and the job was so tiresome, so he sat down upon a stone and cried. And as he sat there, the king of the ants, whose life he had saved, came to help him with 5,000 ants, and it was not long before they had found all the pearls and laid them in a heap. The second tablet said, "The key of the princess's bedchamber must be fished up out of the lake." And as the dwarf came to the brink of it, he saw the 2 ducks whose lives he had saved swimming about, and they dived down and soon brought in the key from the bottom. The third task was the hardest. It was to choose out the youngest and the best of the king's 3 daughters. Now they were all beautiful, and all exactly alike. But he was told that the eldest had eaten a piece of sugar, the next some sweet syrup, and the youngest a spoonful of honey. So he was to guess which it was that had eaten the honey. Then came the queen of the bees, who had been saved by the little dwarf from the fire, and she tried the lips of all 3. But at last she sat upon the lips of the one that had eaten the honey. And so the dwarf knew which was the youngest. Thus the spell was broken, and all who had been turned into stones awoke and took their proper forms. And the dwarf married the youngest and the best of the princesses, and was king after her father's death. But his 2 brothers married the other 2 sisters. That was the Queen Bee, Sweet Dreams. Welcome to Bedtime Classics. Let the world around you grow quiet. Tonight's story is The Robber Bridegroom, a fairy tale by the brothers Grimm. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and drift gently into sleep. There was once a miller who had one beautiful daughter, and as she was grown up, he was anxious that she should be well married and provided for. He said to himself, "I will give her to the first suitable man who comes and asks for her hand." Not long after a suitor appeared, and as he appeared to be very rich and the miller could see nothing in him with which to find fault, he betrothed his daughter to him. But the girl did not care for the man as a girl ought to care for her betrothed husband. She did not feel that she could trust him, and she could not look at him, nor think of him without an inward shudder. One day he said to her, "You have not yet paid me a visit, although we have been betrothed for some time." "I do not know where your house is," she answered. "My house is out there in the dark forest," he said. She tried to excuse herself by saying that she would not be able to find the way thither. Her betrothed only replied, "You must come and see me next Sunday. I have already invited guests for that day, and that you may not mistake the way, I will strew ashes along the path." When Sunday came and it was time for the girl to start, a feeling of dread came over her which she could not explain, and that she might be able to find her path again. She filled her pockets with peas and lentils to sprinkle on the ground as she went along. On reaching the entrance to the forest, she found the path strewed with ashes, and these she followed, throwing down some peas on either side of her at every step she took. She walked the whole day until she came to the deepest, darkest part of the forest. There she saw a lonely house looking so grim and mysterious that it did not please her at all. She stepped inside, but not a soul was to be seen, and a great silence reigned throughout. Suddenly a voice cried, turn back, young maiden fair, linger not in this murderer's lair." The girl looked up and saw that the voice came from a bird hanging in a cage on the wall. Again it cried, turn back, young maiden fair, linger not in this murderer's lair." The girl passed on, going from room to room of the house, but they were all empty, and still she saw no one. At last she came to the cellar, and there sat a very, very old woman who could not keep her head from shaking. "Can you tell me," asked the girl, "if my betrothed husband lives here?" "Ah, you poor child," answered the old woman. "What a place for you to come to! This is a murderer's den. You think yourself a promised bride, and that your marriage will soon take place, but it is with death that you will keep your marriage feast. Look, do you see that large cauldron of water which I am obliged to keep on the fire? As soon as they have you in their power, they will kill you without mercy, and cook and eat you, for they are eaters of men. If I did not take pity on you and save you, you would be lost." Thereupon the old woman led her behind a large cask, which quite hid her from view. "Keep as still as a mouse," she said. "Do not move or speak, or it will be all over with you. Tonight, when the robbers are all asleep, we will flee together. I have long been waiting for an opportunity to escape." The words were hardly out of her mouth when the godless crew returned, dragging another young girl along with them. They were all drunk and paid no heed to her cries and lamentations. They gave her wine to drink, 3 glasses full, 1 of white wine, 1 of red, and 1 of yellow. And with that her heart gave way and she died. Then they tore off her dainty clothing, laid her on a table, and cut her beautiful body into pieces and sprinkled salt upon it. The poor betrothed girl crouched trembling and shuddering behind the cask, for she saw what a terrible fate had been intended for her by the robbers. One of them now noticed a gold ring still remaining on the little finger of the murdered girl, and as he could not draw it off easily, he took a hatchet and cut off the finger. But the finger sprang into the air and fell behind the cask into the lap of the girl who was hiding there. The robber took a light and began looking for it, but he could not find it. "Have you looked behind the large cask?" said one of the others. But the old woman called out, "Come and eat your suppers and let the thing be till tomorrow. The finger won't run away." "The old woman is right," said the robbers, and they ceased looking for the finger and sat down. The old woman then mixed a sleeping draught with their wine, and before long they were all lying on the floor of the cellar, fast asleep and snoring. As soon as the girl was assured of this, she came from behind the cask. She was obliged to step over the bodies of the sleepers who were lying close together, and every moment she was filled with renewed dread lest she should awaken them. But God helped her so that she passed safely over them, and then she and the old woman went upstairs, opened the door, and hastened as fast as they could from the murderer's den. They found the ashes scattered by the wind, but the peas and lentils had sprouted and grown sufficiently above the ground to guide them in the moonlight along the path. All night long they walked, and it was morning before they reached the mill. Then the girl told her father all that had happened. The day came that had been fixed for the marriage. The bridegroom arrived, and also a large company of guests, for the miller had taken care to invite all his friends and relations. As they sat at the feast, each guest in turn was asked to tell a tale. The bride sat still and did not say a word. "And you, my love," said the bridegroom, turning to her, "is there no tale you know? Tell us something." "I will tell you a dream then," said the bride. "I went alone through a forest and came at last to a house. Not a soul could I find within, but a bird that was hanging in a cage on the wall cried, 'Turn back, young maiden fair, linger not in this murderer's lair.' And again, a second time, it said these words, 'My darling, this is only a dream.' I went on through the house from room to room, but they were all empty, and everything was so grim and mysterious. At last, I went down to the cellar, and there sat a very, very old woman who could not keep her head still. I asked her if my betrothed lived here, and she answered, 'Ah, you poor child, you are come to a murderer's den. Your betrothed does indeed live here, but he will kill you without mercy, and afterwards cook and eat you.' My darling, this is only a dream." The old woman hid me behind a large cask, and scarcely had she done this when the robbers returned home, dragging a young girl along with them. They gave her 3 kinds of wine to drink, white, red, and yellow, and with that she died. "My darling, this is only a dream." Then they tore off her dainty clothing and cut her beautiful body into pieces and sprinkled salt upon it. "My darling, this is only a dream." And one of the robbers saw that there was a gold ring still left on her finger, and as it was difficult to draw off, he took a hatchet and cut off her finger, but the finger sprang into the air and fell behind the great cask into my lap. And here is the finger with the ring. And with these words, the bride drew forth the finger and showed it to the assembled guests. The bridegroom, who during this recital had grown deadly pale, up and tried to escape, but the guests seized him and held him fast. They delivered him up to justice, and he and all his murderous band were condemned to death for their wicked deeds. That was the Robber Bridegroom. Sweet dreams. Welcome to Bedtime Classics. Let the world around you grow quiet. Tonight's story is The Willow-Wren and the Bear, a fairy tale by the brothers Grimm. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and drift gently into sleep. Once in summertime, the bear and the wolf were walking in the forest, and the bear heard a bird singing so beautifully that he said, "Brother Wolf, what bird is it that sings so well?" "That is the king of birds," said the wolf, "before whom we must bow down." In reality, the bird was the willow-wren. "If that's the case," said the bear, "I should very much like to see his royal palace. Come, take me thither." "That is not done quite as you seem to think," said the wolf. "You must wait until the queen comes." Soon afterwards, the queen arrived with some food in her beak, and the Lord King came too, and they began to feed their young ones. The bear would have liked to go at once, but the wolf held him back by the sleeve and said, "No, you must wait until the Lord and Lady Queen have gone away again." So they took stock of the hole where the nest lay and trotted away. The bear, however, could not rest until he had seen the royal palace, and, when a short time had passed, went to it again. The king and queen had just flown out, so he peeped in and saw 5 or 6 young ones lying there. "Is that the royal palace?" cried the bear. "It is a wretched palace, and you are not king's children, you are disreputable children." When the young wrens heard that, they were frightfully angry and screamed, "No, that we are not! Our parents are honest people. Bear, you will have to pay for that." The bear and the wolf grew uneasy and turned back and went into their holes. The young willow wrens, however, continued to cry and scream, and when their parents again brought food, they said, "We will not so much as touch one fly's leg, no, not if we were dying of hunger, until you have settled whether we are respectable children or not. The bear has been here and has insulted us." Then the old king said, "Be easy, he shall be punished." And he at once flew with the queen to the bear's cave and called in, "Old growler, why have you insulted my children? You shall suffer for it. We will punish you by a bloody war." Thus war was announced to the bear, and all 4-footed animals were summoned to take part in it: oxen, asses, cows, deer, and every other animal the earth contained. And the willow-wren summoned everything which flew in the air, not only birds large and small, but midges and hornets, bees and flies had to come. When the time came for the war to begin, the Willow-Wren sent out spies to discover who was the enemy's commander-in-chief. The gnat, who was the most crafty, flew into the forest where the enemy was assembled and hid herself beneath a leaf of the tree where the password was to be announced. There stood the bear, and he called the fox before him and said, "Fox, you are the most cunning of all animals. You shall be general and lead us." "Good," said the fox, "but what signal shall we agree upon?" No one knew that, so the fox said, "I have a fine, long, bushy tail, which almost looks like a plume of red feathers. When I lift my tail up quite high, all is going well, and you must charge. But if I let it hang down, run away as fast as you can." When the gnat had heard that, she flew away again and revealed everything, down to the minutest detail, to the Willow-Wren. When day broke and the battle was to begin, all the four-footed animals came running up with such a noise that the earth trembled. The Willow-Wren with his army also came flying through the air with such a humming and whirring and swarming that everyone was uneasy and afraid, and on both sides they advanced against each other. But the Willow-Wren sent down the hornet with orders to settle beneath the fox's tail and sting with all his might. When the fox felt the first sting, he started so that he lifted one leg from pain, but he bore it and still kept his tail high in the air. At the second sting, he was forced to put it down for a moment. At the third, he could hold out no longer, screamed, and put his tail between his legs. When the animals saw that, they thought all was lost and began to flee, each into his hole, and the birds had won the battle. Then the king and queen flew home to their children and cried, "Children, rejoice, eat and drink to your heart's content. We have won the battle." But the young wrens said, "We will not eat yet. The bear must come to the nest and beg for pardon and say that we are honorable children before we will do that." Then the Willow-Wren flew to the bear's hole and cried, "Growler, you are to come to the nest to my children and beg their pardon, or else every rib of your body shall be broken." So the bear crept thither in the greatest fear and begged their pardon. And now at last the young wrens were satisfied and sat down together and ate and drank and made merry till quite late into the night. That was the Willow-Wren and the Bear. Sweet dreams. Welcome to Bedtime Classics. Let the world around you grow quiet. Tonight's story is The Wolf and the Seven Little Kids, a fairy tale by the brothers Grimm. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and drift gently into sleep. There was once upon a time an old goat who had 7 little kids and loved them with all the love of a mother for her children. One day she wanted to go into the forest and fetch some food, so she called all 7 to her and said, "Dear children, I have to go into the forest. Be on your guard against the wolf. If he comes in, he will devour you all, skin, hair, and everything. The wretch often disguises himself, but you will know him at once by his rough voice and his black feet." The kids said, "Dear mother, we will take good care of ourselves. You may go away without any anxiety." Then the old one bleated and went on her way with an easy mind. It was not long before someone knocked at the house door and called, "Open the door, dear children. Your mother is here and has brought something back with her for each of you." But the little kids knew that it was the wolf, by the rough voice. "We will not open the door," cried they. "You are not our mother. She has a soft, pleasant voice, but your voice is rough. "You are the wolf." Then the wolf went away to a shopkeeper and bought himself a great lump of chalk, ate this, and made his voice soft with it. Then he came back, knocked at the door of the house, and called, "Open the door, dear children. Your mother is here and has brought something back with her for each of you." But the wolf had laid his black paws against the window, and the children saw them and cried, "We will not open the door. Our mother has not black feet like you. You are the wolf." Then the wolf ran to a baker and said, "I have hurt my feet. Rub some dough over them for me." And when the baker had rubbed his feet over, he ran to the miller and said, "Strew some white meal over my feet for me." The miller thought to himself, "The wolf wants to deceive someone," and refused. But the wolf said, "If you will not do it, I will devour you." Then the miller was afraid and made his paws white for him. Truly, this is the way of mankind. So now the wretch went for the third time to the house door, knocked at it and said, "Open the door for me, children. Your dear little mother has come home and has brought every one of you something back from the forest with her." The little kids cried, "First show us your paws that we may know if you are our dear little mother." Then he put his paws in through the window, and when the kids saw that they were white, they believed that all he said was true, and opened the door. But who should come in but the wolf? They were terrified and wanted to hide themselves. One sprang under the table, the second into the bed, the third into the stove, the fourth into the kitchen, the fifth into the cupboard, the sixth under the washing bowl, and the seventh into the clock case. But the wolf found them all, and used no great ceremony. One after the other he swallowed them down his throat. The youngest, who was in the clock case, was the only one he did not find. When the wolf had satisfied his appetite, he took himself off, laid himself down under a tree in the green meadow outside, and began to sleep. Soon afterwards, the old goat came home again from the forest. Ah, what a sight she saw there! The house door stood wide open. The table, chairs, and benches were thrown down. The washing bowl lay broken to pieces, and the quilts and pillows were pulled off the bed. She sought her children, but they were nowhere to be found. She called them one after another by name, but no one answered. At last, when she came to the youngest, a soft voice cried, "Dear mother, I am in the clock case." She took the kid out, and it told her that the wolf had come and had eaten all the others. Then you may imagine how she wept over her poor children. At length, in her grief, she went out, and the youngest kid ran with her. When they came to the meadow, there lay the wolf by the tree and snored so loud that the branches shook. She looked at him on every side and saw that something was moving and struggling in his gorged belly. "Ah, heavens," she said, "is it possible that my poor children whom he has swallowed down for his supper can be still alive?" Then the kid had to run home and fetch scissors and a needle and thread, and the goat cut open the monster's stomach, and hardly had she made one cut than one little kid thrust its head out, and when she had cut farther, all 6 sprang out one after another and were all still alive and had suffered no injury whatever, for in his greediness the monster had swallowed them down whole. What rejoicing there was! They embraced their dear mother and jumped like a tailor at his wedding. The mother, however, said, "Now go and look for some big stones, and we will fill the wicked beast's stomach with them while he is still asleep." Then the 7 kids dragged the stones thither with all speed, and put as many of them into this stomach as they could get in. And the mother sewed him up again in the greatest haste, so that he was not aware of anything, and never once stirred. When the wolf at length had had his fill of sleep, he got on his legs, And as the stones in his stomach made him very thirsty, he wanted to go to a well to drink. But when he began to walk and to move about, the stones in his stomach knocked against each other and rattled. Then cried he, "What rumbles and tumbles against my poor bones? I thought 'twas 6 kids, but it feels like big stones." And when he got to the well and stooped over the water to drink, the heavy stones made him fall in, and he drowned miserably. When the 7 kids saw that, they came running to the spot and cried aloud, "The wolf is dead! The wolf is dead!" and danced for joy round about the well with their mother. That was the wolf and the 7 little kids. Sweet dreams. Welcome to Bedtime Classics. Let the world around you grow quiet. Tonight's story is Brother and Sister, a fairy tale by the Brothers Grimm. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and drift gently into sleep. There was once a little brother who took his sister by the hand and said, "Since our own dear mother's death, we have not had one happy hour. Our stepmother beats us every day, and when we come near her, kicks us away with her foot. Come, let us wander forth into the wide world." So all day long they travelled over meadows, fields, and stony roads. By the evening they came into a large forest and laid themselves down in a hollow tree and went to sleep. When they awoke the next morning, the sun had already risen high in the heavens, and its beams made the tree so hot that the little boy said to his sister, "I am so very thirsty that if I knew where there was a brook, I would go and drink. Ah, I think I hear one running." And so saying, he got up, and taking his sister's hand, they went to look for the brook. The wicked stepmother, however, was a witch, and had witnessed the departure of the 2 children. So, sneaking after them secretly, as is the habit of witches, she had enchanted all the springs in the forest. Presently they found a brook, which ran trippingly over the pebbles, and the brother would have drunk out of it, but the sister heard how it said as it ran along, "Who drinks of me will become a tiger." So the sister exclaimed, "I pray you, brother, drink not, or you will become a tiger and tear me to pieces." So the brother did not drink, although his thirst was very great, and he said, "I will wait till the next brook." As they came to the second, the sister heard it say, "Who drinks of me becomes a wolf." The sister ran up crying, "Brother, do not, pray do not drink, or you will become a wolf and eat me up." Then the brother did not drink, saying, "I will wait until we come to the next spring, but then I must drink, you may say what you will. My thirst is much too great." Just as they reached the 3rd brook, the sister heard the voice saying, "Who drinks of me will become a fawn. Who drinks of me will become a fawn." So the sister said, "Oh, my brother, do not drink, or you will be changed into a fawn and run away from me." But he had already kneeled down, and he drank of the water, and, as the first drops passed his lips, his shape took that of a fawn. At first, the sister wept over her little changed brother, and he wept too, and knelt by her, very sorrowful. But at last the maiden said, "Be still, dear little fawn, and I will never forsake you." And, taking off her golden garter, she placed it around his neck, and, weaving rushes, made a girdle to lead him with. This she tied to him, and taking the other end in her hand, she led him away, and they travelled deeper and deeper into the forest. After they had gone a long distance, they came to a little hut, And the maiden, peeping in, found it empty and thought, "Here we can stay and dwell." Then she looked for leaves and moss to make a soft couch for the fawn. And every morning she went out and collected roots and berries and nuts for herself and tender grass for the fawn. In the evening, when the sister was tired and had said her prayers, she laid her head upon the back of the fawn, which served for a pillow on which she slept soundly. Had but the brother regained his own proper form, their lives would have been happy indeed. Thus they dwelt in this wilderness, and some time had elapsed when it happened that the king of the country had a great hunt in the forest. And now sounded through the trees the blowing of horns, the barking of dogs, and the lusty cry of the hunters, so that the little fawn heard them and wanted very much to join in. "Ah," said he to his sister, "let me go to the hunt. I cannot restrain myself any longer." And he begged so hard that at last she consented. "But," she told him, "return again in the evening, for I shall shut my door against the wild huntsmen, and, that I may know you, do you knock and say, 'Sister dear, let me in,' and if you do not speak, I shall not open the door." As soon as she had said this, the little fawn sprang off, quite glad and merry in the fresh breeze. The king and his huntsmen perceived the beautiful animal and pursued him, but they could not catch him, and when they thought they certainly had him, he sprang away over the bushes and got out of sight. Just as it was getting dark, he ran up to the hut and, knocking, said, "Sister mine, let me in." Then she unfastened the little door, and he went in, and rested all night long upon his soft couch. The next morning the hunt was commenced again, and as soon as the little fawn heard the horns and the tally-ho of the sportsmen, he could not rest, and said, "Sister dear, open the door. I must be off." The sister opened it, saying, "Return at evening, mind, and say the words as before." When the king and his huntsmen saw him again, the fawn with the golden necklace, they followed him, close, but he was too nimble and quick for them. The whole day long they kept up with him, but towards evening the huntsmen made a circle around him, and one wounded him slightly in the hinder foot, so that he could run but slowly. Then one of them slipped after him to the little hut, and heard him say, "Sister dear, open the door," and saw that the door was opened and immediately shut behind him. The huntsman, having observed all this, went and told the king what he had seen and heard, and he said, "On the morrow I will pursue him once again." The sister, however, was terribly afraid when she saw that her fawn was wounded, and, washing off the blood, she put herbs upon the foot and said, "Go and rest upon your bed, dear fawn, that your wound may heal." It was so slight that the next morning he felt nothing of it, and when he heard the hunting cries outside, he exclaimed, "I cannot stop away. I must be there, and none shall catch me so easily again." The sister wept very much and told him, "Soon will they kill you, and I shall be here alone in this forest, forsaken by all the world. I cannot let you go." "I shall die here in vexation," answered the fawn, "if you do not, for when I hear the horn, I think I shall jump out of my skin." The sister, finding she could not prevent him, opened the door with a heavy heart, and the fawn jumped out, quite delighted, into the forest. As soon as the king perceived him, he said to his huntsman, "Follow him all day long till the evening, but let no one do him any harm." Then, when the sun had set, the king asked his huntsman to show him the hut, and as they came to it, he knocked at the door and said, "Let me in, dear sister." Upon this, the door opened, and stepping in, the king saw a maiden more beautiful than he had ever beheld before. She was frightened when she saw not her fawn, but a man enter who had a golden crown upon his head. But the king, looking at her with a kindly glance, held out to her his hand, saying, "Will you go with me to my castle and be my dear wife?" "Oh, yes," replied the maiden, "but the fawn must go too. Him I will never forsake." The king replied, "He shall remain with you as long as you live, and shall never want." The king took the beautiful maiden upon his horse and rode to his castle, where the wedding was celebrated with great splendor, and she became queen. And they lived together a long time, while the fawn was taken care of and played about the castle garden. The wicked stepmother, however, on whose account the children had wandered forth into the world, had supposed that long ago the sister had been torn into pieces by the wild beasts, and the little brother in his fawn's shape hunted to death by the hunters. As soon, therefore, as she heard how happy they had become and how everything prospered with them, envy and jealousy were aroused in her wicked heart and left her no peace, and she was always thinking in what way she could bring misfortune upon them. Her own daughter, who was as ugly as night and had but one eye, for which she was continually reproached, said, "The luck of being a queen has never happened to me." "Be quiet now," replied the old woman, "and make yourself contented. When the time comes, I will help and assist you." As soon then, as the time came when the queen gave birth to a beautiful little boy, which happened when the king was out hunting, the old witch took the form of a chambermaid and got into the room where the queen was lying and said to her, "The bath is ready, which will restore you and give you fresh strength. Be quick before it gets cold." Her daughter being at hand, they carried the weak queen between them into the room and laid her in the bath, and then, shutting the door, they ran off. But first they made up an immense fire in the stove, which must soon suffocate the poor young queen. When this was done, the old woman took her daughter and, putting a cap upon her head, laid her in the bed in the queen's place. She gave her, too, the form and appearance of the real queen, as far as she was able, but she could not restore the lost eye, and, so that the king might not notice it, she turned her upon that side where there was no eye. When midnight came and everyone was asleep, the nurse who sat by herself, wide awake near the cradle in the nursery, saw the door open and the true queen come in. She took the child in her arms and rocked it a while, and then, shaking up its pillow, laid it down in its cradle and covered it over again. She did not forget the fawn either, but going to the corner where he was, stroked his head, and then went silently out of the door. The nurse asked in the morning of the guards if anyone had passed into the castle during the night, but they answered, "No, we have not seen anybody." For many nights afterwards she came constantly, but never spoke a word, and the nurse saw her always, but she would not trust herself to speak about it to anyone. When some time had passed away, the queen one night began to speak and said, "How fares my child? How fares my fawn? Twice more will I come, but never again." The nurse made no reply, but, when she had disappeared, went to the king and told him. The king exclaimed, "Oh, mercy, what does this mean? The next night I will watch myself by the child." So, in the evening, he went into the nursery, and about midnight the queen appeared and said, "How fares my child? How fares my fawn? Once more will I come, but never again." And she nursed the child as she usually did and then disappeared. The king dared not speak, but he watched the following night, and this time she said, "How fares my child? How fares my fawn? This time have I come, but never again." At these words, the king could hold back no longer, but springing up, cried, "You can be no other than my dear wife." Then she answered, "Yes, I am your dear wife." And at that moment, her life was restored by God's mercy, and she was again as beautiful and charming as ever. She told the king the fraud which the witch and her daughter had practiced upon him, and he had them both tried, and sentence was pronounced against them. The little fawn was disenchanted and received once more his human form, and the brother and sister lived happily together to the end of their days. That was Brother and Sister. Sweet dreams.